Hi, I'm Warren Zenna, founder and CEO of the CRO Collective, and welcome to the CRO Spotlight podcast. This show is focused exclusively on the success of chief revenue officers. Each week, we have an open, frank, and free-form conversation with top experts in the revenue space about the CRO role and its critical impact on B2B businesses. This podcast is the place to be for CROs, sales and marketing leaders who aspire to become CROs, and founders who are looking to appoint a CRO or want to support their CRO to succeed. Thanks for listening. Now let's go mix it up. All right, everybody. Welcome to this episode of the CRO Spotlight podcast. This is Warren Zenna. I am the founder and CEO of the CRO Collective. And I'm real excited today. I've got a partner of mine here, Elio Narciso, who I work with him weirdly, sort of like, we have a really interesting story. It's kind of weird. So Elio and I, we met because I was an executive at Havas, and I was involved in the location data space because of the mobile focus of the business anyway. And Elio will tell the story. But anyway, we met like 4 or 5 times. We ended up living in the same building, but we'll get into it. So Elio, welcome. I'm really glad you came, and it's really been fun working with you for the last couple of months.
Absolutely. Thank you, Warren, for having me. And hi, everybody. My name is Elio, co-founder and CEO here at Skillstack. And I do tell the story, and when I tell it, it's super interesting. And it's one of those things that I've never thought about it. But then once you start telling it, it's like quite interesting. So Warren and I met because he was at Avast. I had like a different company that was doing our goal was to build the Google Analytics for offline. And so we had developed this platform of sensors, and Warren was top-notch expert in location while at Avast. Actually, I don't remember, what did you have a practice that was doing this stuff?
Yeah, so it was interesting. Like when I was at Havas at the time, this is a long time ago. This is 2016. So
yeah,
think about how long ago that is, right? It's not that long ago, but it really was long ago. So it was most of the media agencies, they don't have this anymore. They've all been sort of absorbed into the larger Borg. But at the time, there were mobile advertising units at these agencies. All the big holding companies, had their own sort of respective competitive mobile focused advertising, because it was kind of carved out as a specific channel to deliver ads on mobile. It wasn't yet sort of part of like the general ecosystem, which it should have been. I think we all knew it. But anyway, and so my focus there when I got there was, well, how could we not just, create ad experiences, which I think everybody was doing. It was more, how do we take advantage of the unique location data that phones offer,
right,
and use it in ways that can dimensionalize targeting and also other ways to make it creative for people. And so we started really getting heavily into that location data and creating programs for that. And as a result, I got really in the weeds on location data. I mean, I became a student of this, like how it works and the differences between GPS data and IP data and the whole thing. And I got really in the weeds with it. I met with a lot of companies that were similarly also using the data, because as you know, it's really interesting. I think it's less valuable now, but anyway, we can even talk about that a bit. So yeah, that's why we were doing it at the time. It was more of a decision to differentiate away. And we did. We created some really cool things. In fact, we created some of the programs that became pretty mainstream, one of which was we helped to build the idea of using location data to track people when they walk by out-of-home ads, to be able to determine if there was some degree of repetition of people's recall from that device later, right? That maybe that we could attribute the visualization or the exposure to that ad as maybe a partial way in which that ad call was influenced. It was fascinating stuff. So anyway, there's that. It was a little boring, but that's what we were.
That's how we met. And I remember it was an investor, Michael Flannery, that introduced us. And then that company didn't work out. I mean, I exited, but it was, something that didn't work out. I still believe in the idea, by the way.
I do too.
I still believe that, offline analytics should be on par with online analytics, but it's always lower in the priority of, things for retailers. That was our primary market. And then I started at AWS, but also invested in a separate company that was doing mobile advertising. And we talked about that. And then one day, I don't know if you came out of the elevator or I was like, but so like, hey, Warren, like, why are you in my building? I said, no, this is my building.
Yeah.
And then we started talking.
Yeah, we live in the same building now. It was so funny and just kept talking. It was, I believe this is an interesting thing that this sort of reminds me of. And you know this because you and I we're both sort of always selling, as part of our roles.
Yes.
We have our own businesses, so we have to be salespeople. And, I don't think enough of this is talked about, is that we're always trying to close on a connection, right? So you meet someone and you want to get them to kind of follow up and get them to close the deal, and, you want to speed up the process and get them to make a decision. And the reality is that most deals take really long time. You meet somebody and then you meet them again. And then, when the timing is right, that relationship, if it's good, you start working together, and that's how most real longer term relationships are forged, is not through trying to force an outcome, but just let it happen. I think that's interesting here. It's like, we just wasn't the right time. And, now we're seeing like we're going to
100%.
It's kind of funny,
I think you say two very interesting things to me. One is this one, although I think that it's unusual, I would say, what happened to us and the fact that like, we've been building this relationship over time. And then like it happened that while I was at AWS, I started imagining Scale Stack, and you were like in the early innings also like CRO Collective. And it was still like a nebulous idea on both sides, but we knew that we were going to work on things like, in a similar place. And then we kept talking. And then like, I think now we are like going in a very interesting direction. And so that's super interesting. I do think it's unusual, but I do think it takes a long time to like gain the trust and develop the knowledge and understand, all.
And then, when your interests align and your needs align. I mean, there's a lot of things that happen. How many people, I can't tell you, it has to be in the hundreds that I speak to. And I remember that the first time we met was years ago, and now we're doing business together because just, your needs align, at the right time. But that being said, I think that we both found ourselves at an interesting point because, when I first started this business, I didn't really think about I bid, but not obviously as much as I do now. I didn't think as much about the operational part, like the data and the processes and all the connective stuff. I mean, I knew that it was going to be a critical part of the way in which a CRO optimizes their role. But then it really got in the weeds about a year into this when I started thinking more about, okay, so less as much about the CRO's role in this stuff that we're talking about, which is, I think, is a unique, distinct thing. Generally speaking, companies just need to get their act together. They're not clear about a lot of things, and they're operating in the dark a lot of times. And, we're getting at a point now with all this go-to-market stuff that's happening in the marketplace right now that we're finalizing ways. I think that it's probably not going to be as much of a problem anymore in the future. I think, in fact, maybe 5 years from now, I think everyone will have enough tools to know what's going on all the time.
Absolutely.
And then it'll be more about what to do with it, right? So now that I know what I have, now I have to know how to behave with that clarity. We have two problems now, which is one is I don't know what it is that I'm looking at, and I don't know what to do with what I'm not looking at. And we can solve the data side of it because I think that's the harder thing to solve. But technology has given us that ability, and that's why I think that the CRO role is unique in that there's a more of a coordination about this that's afforded with the CRO today than a broken up, siloed organization where you have marketing trying to figure out their data and sales trying to figure out their data, and vice versa, which I think is a problem. So, I mean, I'd love to hear a little bit more your philosophy on that, because it's a fascinating time we're in right now where these sort of things are being solved, interestingly.
Finally, I would say.
I agree.
About time.
Yeah.
But I agree that it's unsolved. I agree that it's important. And I think that the more I talk to CROs and even at the event that we did together, and it's becoming very clear that there is a certain level of confidence that people have, especially people in place that have been doing this for a while, about what go-to-market strategies should they have and implement. but there is very little confidence in the data. And so like we see like the same problems over and over, like, low trust in the data, go-to-market data, which comes from like the CRM, third-party data sources, like data about, customers, usage, churn, all of that stuff needs to be orchestrated well in a way that is not like absorbing all of your time. So that like, as you said, people are building on the data, using the data, but not spending time like, figuring out, do we have the right data? Like, how can we get to the right data? I think we're not there yet, but I think it will be very fast moving over the next like couple of years, where all of this will be playing out, because now there is AI, and AI is a catalyst for this, because if you give an AI product bad data, the results will be awful. It's just like a spotlight on data. AI puts a spotlight on data. So if the underlying data is bad, the results will be terrible. And so that's a catalyst. In order to use AI, you need to feed AI with good data. And so the status quo that we have or had about like, oh yeah, my CRM data is terrible. Well, like, yeah, it's like all unclean, full of duplicates, and there is no hygiene, and like it's totally misaligned territories and all of that needs to be gone. But AI is not only a catalyst, but also a form factor of like technology that will be used to transform this. Because now there is agents, and this is what we use as Skillstack, that like clean the data, validate it, and do automated research on top of like standard data sources or internal data sources that you have. And that's super fascinating, because all of those manual, repetitive, boring tasks that, are now done by humans or with hard-coded duct tape solutions are being fast resolved by agents. And that's very interesting, because it's an interesting application of AI. I mean, there is a lot of concern about AI replacing people's jobs, and I think some of that will happen. But in this case, is replacing like really boring work that people in sales and marketing still today have to do, because technology for like the past 20 plus years has sort of failed them to solve that very basic problem.
Thank you so much again for listening to the CRO Spotlight podcast. This podcast is an important plank in the CRO Collective communication strategy, and we're really thrilled to have such great guests on here. So listening and sharing the podcast with other people is really vital, because we want to get as many people listening to this great stuff as possible. A couple of things to note. If you're a aspiring CRO or a recently hired CRO or even an old salty CRO, and you're looking to either become a chief revenue officer or improve your chops and gain some more insights and improve your competencies as a chief revenue officer, we offer the CRO Accelerator course. It's 5 years now. It's the first CRO-focused course that was out there. It's a 15-week course that is populated by aspiring chief revenue officers and CROs. We're pretty selective in terms of who can be a member of the CRO Accelerator course. It's people who are probably more ready to be a CRO right now. They have a number of years under their belt as a revenue leader, whether it be a sales leader or a marketing leader or even a RevOps leader. And they either want to move into the C-suite, or they're CROs that want to just make sure that they win in the role. The CRO Accelerator course, we kick off the next one in mid-May 2025. So if you are interested in being a member of the next cohort, please just write me a note on LinkedIn. Just DM me, CRO Accelerator, and we'll set up a time to talk. And then I can send you more information to give you a brochure of the course. So again, CRO Accelerator course, 15-week program for aspiring and newly hired CROs. Take advantage of it. It's been great. And you'll see some more information about it on the website. Thanks. Yeah, I get it. I agree. Interestingly, I think that you're right, that there's probably maybe there's probably a bunch, but there's two core ways in which AI, I think, is going to solve problems. One is going to be replacement. There's no doubt about it. I think that there's certain industries that are threatened right now by it, but that's okay. There was a lot of grave diggers before penicillin was invented, and we don't need them anymore. But I think at the same time, there's also the other side of it, which is there's a lot of shit work that we do that we shouldn't be doing that takes us away from where we should be. And that if we can get that stuff done automated wise, it's better for everybody because it keeps us focused on things that we need to be doing. And so I think that there's good news in the future there. And I think that's probably more likely. I think what's going to happen is if you look at alone salespeople, the amount of time that they've been pulled away from actually selling has been
Yeah.
ridiculous. It's stupid. It's the point where salespeople aren't salespeople now. They're like almost like, like data engineers at this point. It's stupid. Just because someone's inside of a dashboard all day long I don't know if a salesperson came to you and said, yeah, I'm really good with Salesforce. I say, well, you shouldn't be. You should be good at customers.
Yeah.
Not a skill set that I want you to develop.
Look, I actually posted about this weekend. I've been doing this weekend posts that are more like philosophical and reflecting on why I'm doing this. I think it's also very important like that, it's close to the core beliefs. And so what I posted yesterday was I started my career in management consulting. And so in management consulting, you start as an analyst. And so that's what I did. You don't even touch sales because sales is reserved for like more senior people, like the principal, the partner. Those are the people that sell. And so for me, sales was not a starting job, but it was like an arrival point, something that you do once you are like senior, default consultative, you understand like things, you understand strategy, and then you can use the work of analysts, the work of other researchers to do your job better and do what humans are good, which is getting business done and do deals and understand customer problems and try to solve them. And so for me, sales was never this like, oh, this is like a basic thing to do. It's actually very complex to do sales.
Very.
It's very difficult, and you need to sort of learn it over a long period of time because it involves like human elements. It involves like capabilities to understand and deconstruct the problem and then associate appropriate solutions. And it's not like an analyst job. It's not like a data researcher. And yet, as you said, reps have to spend a ton of data clicking Chrome extensions and figuring out how to get contact data or trying to Google search stuff on the web about their prospects or accounts. And so that's how they spend there are statistics that says they spend up to 70% of the time doing this stuff and then putting this data into the CRM, which is, by the time you're done, you're tired. You need to take a break and you need to start your day job, which is selling.
Yeah, I think it's a bad thing that happened, and I could speak to it. I'm a perfect example of someone who was, I don't want to say victim of it, but it came at the expense of some things for me, and that is that, during the, between 2000 and probably recently, I'd say, when you get hired in a sales position today, you're required to be entering data into your system. I mean, they need the data from you to be able to analyze what you're doing, right? It's not like you can not do it. You have to, and you have to have everybody do it, because if you want the whole picture, then you need everybody to comply with these requirements, which are newfangled things that you never did when I was selling when I was younger. And so what ended up doing is, it's a different personality profile of someone who does this sort of thing, right? So, people who are really good at, I remember this happened like 3 or 4 times over the course of my sales career, was the people that ended up keeping their jobs were, not only they were good at closing deals, but they were just really good at complying with the data entry requirements. Because, this is a weird thing. The dynamics of these organizations was that they need to be like, it's like the way we look at the stock market today, right? We look at the stock market like almost a minute by minute, like one little blip at between like 4 p.m. and 4:15 p.m. means the world to everybody. Whereas 20 years ago, you looked at what it looked like for the week, and that was when everybody reacted, because we're so granular now in the way that we analyze things that everything has more meaning, maybe more meaning than it should have. And we're more emotional. We're more reactive to that meaning. Similarly, sales became something you could measure. So, bean counters, whether they be investment partners, they want to know more data all the time. They want it updated all the time. It's what fed their kind of need to be involved and transparent. And so operators of the business were feeding the board all these data points all the time, which means I had to have my salespeople give me that data so I can give it to them. And this requirement pulled people off of their jobs just to give people information that they needed that was actually detrimental to the degree of speed with which the salespeople could do their job, because they're being pulled off of the thing they need to do. It's like a really weird thing that happened.
I love that metaphor. I mean, finance, a trader, and maybe now it's all computers and machines, but a trader that needs to put together like all of his or her data, like, will have wasted like most of his time doing this. And
Exactly.
so
I mean, it's
they
enough.
have everything. They have Bloomberg terminals. They have like, lots of reports. They have dashboards and like plenty of stuff to look at things, but not to compose the basic data so that they can make sense of that to act on trades. And so reps should have everything ready for them. They shouldn't be the analysts putting together this data, so that then can reflect on the data, on the insights, and make connections. Oh, this person know that person, and I did that at the other company, and like this company is launching a new like cloud migration initiative, which is very aligned with what we sell. And so let me send like a note, or like say something on LinkedIn that targets that person. So I think that that's the missing link here, that like we have required reps to be also researchers and analysts, and they are not.
They're not.
They should consume the data ready made for them. And so, maybe they should spend like 30% of their time on the data, but not manually collating the data, actually thinking about the data, and then 70% acting on it.
Yeah, I see the future being that instead of, which I think maybe the the pushback on all this data was maybe about 3 or 4 years ago, was, do we need all this data? Maybe we're swimming in too much of it. Maybe a lot of it's useless, and maybe we should start rethinking this. We've kind of gotten drunk on data. Maybe we need just more competent salespeople in the marketplace, building relationships, because that's what always worked in the past. And I thought maybe before these technological innovations came, that may have been the way that the market bent the other direction. Sometimes there's like a pendulum shift, and there might have been a okay, we got drunk on data. Maybe we just pick the data that matters most, and we'll just analyze less of it. But that was naive of me. I don't think that our organizations are ever going to stop wanting more data. They're going to want more. I think
If
it's really about how to get the data to you easier, and how to get it more accurate and quicker with less stress. And that's why I think the tools today are going to solve that problem. I sort of look at it like, you look at Tony Stark wearing his outfit, and he's talking to Jarvis, and he just talks to Jarvis, and Jarvis just does everything for him. He asks anything. Jarvis, analyze my blood, analyze this thing, look at this. And Jarvis
that's
just
a
gives
good
him all the
metaphor,
data
yeah.
that he needs, and it all happens. And he also has Jarvis connected to all of Stark's other systems. So if he wants to deploy something from one of his base stations, he just tells Jarvis to do it, and Jarvis just makes a call and it does it. And so, it's immediate, and it doesn't require that Tony has to be analyzing the data, because he built something that analyzes it for him. And the AI allows it to be more personal to me. So I can ask the questions that I need and get the data that I want based on the questions that I need, as opposed to having to look through data and then figuring out how to match it to the need that I have, because I don't have a relationship with someone who's controlling the data. And I think that this is where we're headed, is that I'll be able to say, hey, better yet would even be predictively. So when I get onto a sales call, it looks at my calendar and it looks at all the people I'm calling, and it has already prepared for me a whole dashboard of insights about everybody that I'm going to call. And I can just say, hey, look, I got these calls today. Let's go over it together. So I'm speaking to Steve Stevenson at 4. Let's go over it. They go, yeah, well, Warren, you did the following analysis, and here's what you need to think about. Here's some things to note. So I'm being given the information when I need it, not having to waste 7 weeks figuring it out, when I should be doing more of that. That'll be a really exciting time for people. And I think that's what's happening now. So anyway, I look at it that way. I
No,
think,
and also I think that the other important thing, I feel that like there's gonna be more data, but it's gonna be used, hopefully, not to spread and pray, but like to be much better at
much more targeted.
prioritizing.
For sure.
Right.
No
So
doubt.
it's all about prioritizing, who you spend time with, like who spends time with you, and like, are they in target? Why? And, why they could be like aligned with what you're doing and what you want to do. I think it's very important. So we're all about prioritization. Maybe quantities would be reduced, hopefully so, like,
Yeah, I think
majority of,
so. Once
you
we
know,
look at all of it, then we'll know the little bit of it that we actually need, and we'll be able to focus on the
which is
little
a
bit that
tiny
we.
fraction, but
It is.
somebody needs to do like the
Yeah.
analyst job to get you to that tiny fraction without you spending time on like,
Yes.
the iceberg underneath the tip, right?
Yes. There's no doubt, and I think that's the main thing we're dealing with right now. What I'm trying to solve with my clients, right, is making sense of complexity so that they can take actions with clarity and they know what they're doing, and there's some resulting predictability in there. And it's where a tool like yours is a useful component of that. So let's talk a bit about that for a second. So I'd love to hear a little bit more history of the company and like how you formulated it and sort of like what's the way in which you're solving these problems for today.
The mission, it's remarkable because we started the company before all of this Gen AI revolution that we're into, but the mission of the company has is super current and still very applicable, and it is to automate all of the manual boring work that people do. And so if machine can do this job better, we want machines to do that boring repetitive work so that humans do what they're better at. And so that was like an intuition that we had, and the first element that we developed was integration. So we need to build really stable and reliable integrations across the entire go-to-market stack, whether that's like CRM integrations or integrations with third-party data sources or integrations with your customer success data and all of that. So that was step one, and the sort of framework of reference for that was Zapier. I don't know if you're familiar with the company.
I use Zapier for a lot of my integrations.
Right. So those are integrations between business apps, right? And so we wanted to do what Zapier does, but going down to the level of data. So because Zapier does mostly integrations between business apps, we wanted to connect data sets and then go down to the level of granular data points that make sales and marketing team decide who to target. And so data about your ideal customer profile, data about your buyer persona, and how you define is this a good account for me, or is this a good prospect or contact for me, and so forth. And so that's the second thing that we build, which is automated workflows that easily align and make the data flow semantically, cleaning in a waterfall, and enriching all of the data. And then in the last year and a half, we built the third component. So integrations, workflows, and now the agentic component. And these are agents, which I think the best proxy or metaphor is really the analyst proxy. So imagine having that analyst, researcher working for you that does the automated research that compares between different data points and different data sources and decides which is best for which category of data that you need. Oh, Dun & Bradstreet is great for larger companies, and Crunchbase is better for smaller companies. And maybe there is a gap, and I do some automated research. So agents doing automated research on the public web, going to websites or PDFs or press releases or anything like that, and bring back data that can be used, but also help you clean the data, validate the data, decide if territory UK is the same as United Kingdom or Great Britain. And so we're not going to make mistakes in creating a new sales territory and assigning to that territory wrong accounts. So basic things, they look basic, but until now, they could not be solved unless it was patch up, hard-coded, or manual effort. I mean, we have customers that have replaced teams of researchers in countries like the Philippines in order to basically do this all automated. And so for me, those three components, integrations, workflows, and agents, are the key components that we have developed, and we are now bringing them all together. And that's why we're seeing an acceleration in the quality of the output, and why our customers are happy. And even though we are a relatively new companies like MongoDB, Redis, and others are using successfully ScaleStack.
Thanks again for listening to the CRO Spotlight podcast. We're excited about all the great guests we have, and more importantly, we're excited mostly about you for being avid listeners and supporting the work that we do here. Feel free, please, to share the CRO Spotlight podcast with any of your colleagues. We just think there's a great wealth of information here, and we want to get the word out to as many people as possible, and your support of the show is really appreciated. I wanted to share information about a program that we offer called the CRO Masters Council. The CRO Masters Council is a bi-monthly group of 6 seasoned chief revenue officers who are looking for a chief revenue officer board of directors, so to speak, that they could share what's going on with them, collaborate with ideas, get some feedback on what's going on in their current role. And these are great conversations. I facilitate them. The CRO Masters Councils, again, they're twice a month, and they last for at least 6 months to a year. So if you're interested in having your own CRO suite, your own board of directors of chief revenue officers, it's a private, confidential conversation that we have. It's infinitely useful. Imagine having a room full of other chief revenue officers you can talk to and say, hey, I'm working on this, or have you guys figured that out? Or I'm having this issue right now with my business or my results. These are just invaluable conversations with chief revenue officers. Chief revenue officers have a very, very unique role. It's a very lonely job, and only other CROs understand what you're going through. So that's why we created this program. So if you're interested in being a member of the next CRO Masters Council, which we have a number of them being put together right now, just go to my LinkedIn and DM me Masters or Masters Council, and I'll follow up with you and set up a call or send you some more information about it. Looking forward to seeing you there, and thank you. How'd you start this? What was your background? I mean, I know like you're obviously not from the United States, or you come from a weird neighborhood or something like that. So where, like, tell me about your journey here. Like, how did you get to this place? It's always interesting to find out.
Born and raised in Italy, south of Italy, Puglia. If you haven't been, you should go.
Hmm?
I know they have a shirt Corleone. That's Sicily, but nice. Born and raised there, and then great place, great family. But I studied in Milan. Then in Milan, which is like, maybe 800, maybe 700 miles like away, which for Italy is big because Italy is a peninsula.
Mm-hmm.
So then in Milan, I started understanding like a different, bigger city and wanted to explore more. And then I was lucky to do an Erasmus, which is a program in Europe that connects lots of colleges. And so you can decide to spend a semester in another college. And I went to Barcelona, loved the place. And so right after college in Milan ended, I took my car and moved to Barcelona, driving, and found my first job there in management consulting. It was a great company, and this was like 1999 or something like that. And it was like the early stages of the mobile revolution. And so this was a company that was created as a spin-off of Monitor and McKinsey, and it was doing like really high level quality strategic work, but only in the telecom space and primarily in the mobile industry. And so we were doing like really cool things all over Europe because we only had like a couple of customers per country, really. And so I traveled extensively all across Europe, and then Asia, and then South America. And then I decided that I wanted to explore the US, which I'd never visited. And so I applied I wanted to do an MBA. I applied only to one school, which was crazy because I had zero time, and got in MIT. And then I did my MBA there, and it was amazing. And that was like early 2000. And it was like the beginning of the startup revolution and like Silicon Valley. And so much that when I was doing my MBA, there were people saying, oh, you're crazy. You're like, investing all of this time in an MBA when you should be like in a startup in the Valley. But I love the environment. I love like stepping back and thinking about like things strategically. I fell in love with entrepreneurship. And so weirdly, after the MBA, I decided to start my career in entrepreneurship, really be an entrepreneur and start companies. SkillStack is my 4 companies. I've had 2 successful exits, one company that didn't work out really, but learned a ton from that. And so my journey is really like at MIT, I spent most of my time at the Entrepreneurship Center and fell in love with this idea that, you can create a company and if you are a believer in something that should be changed, why not? And that became like a lifelong passion, with a parenthesis at AWS, which has always, like Amazon was always an inspiration for me. Like I read books about the leadership principles, and, I had applied some of them on my startups. And then when I decided to take a break, I didn't have an idea. I got offered like a great position managing BD, business development, for startups at AWS here in New York. And I built a program called the AWS Global Startup Program, which was very successful. It sort of my legacy there still exists. And we had 600 startups under management by the time I left. And that's where I got the idea for SkillStack, because I'd always thought that, like, my companies had bad data because they were, like, startups, fast growing companies.
Mm-hmm.
And I assumed that, like, a company like Amazon would have had, like, great data. And that wasn't the case. Salesforce was still a disaster at AWS, and you couldn't, like, really get the data that you needed, so much that to manage my team and my program, I had spreadsheets, so I was using spreadsheets with thousands of companies that we needed to, like, prioritize and distribute across the, BD team in order to decide who we were supporting and who were not going to be supported. And that was like a spreadsheet that I manually put together with tens of thousands of companies and, like, inputs from Crunchbase, PitchBook. And then at some point I said, like, this is crazy. This should be done by machine, computer.
Yep.
Or by the CRM, but CRM wasn't doing it. And so we decided to start a company with my co-founder, Alex.
Mm-hmm.
And
it's interesting you say about it's cool. I love it. I love that story. I love these stories about how people find their way through things. I mean, it's like weird, nothing's planned. But, I'm curious about this, what you said before. So when you look at the future of this whole business that you're in, and this, let's call it data enrichment or data intelligence and data automation, I mean, is the CRM going to stay at the center of everything? I mean, do you think, like, for example, ultimately just Salesforce and HubSpot just absorb all these companies and just sort of automate everything, and it's going to happen all there? Or is it going to be pulling away from the CRM and it's going to happen outside somewhere else?
It's a very interesting question. We don't know the answer yet. I think that the AI, there was a report from Andreessen that was titled, like, Death of the Salesforce.
Mm-hmm.
So I think that everything is very disruptive. And so while Salesforce, I admire the company. Like, if you look at the results every year, like, year after year for like 20 years plus, increases in both revenues and, margins. So remarkable company built on ecosystem, but with a product that, frankly, from the perspective of the rep, which should, it's Salesforce. It's a terrible product. We have to be honest. It's a product that I think works for CFOs, in many ways. Maybe works at a certain level for, like, some even larger consumer businesses that use Salesforce for large, like, user consumer data. But, like, for sales teams and marketing teams at B2B companies, I think it's a really challenging product.
Yeah,
and
Salesforce is like a company that is an amazing product that's horrible for the end user.
And so
it's weird.
Yeah, it's weird. And so, the buyers are probably other people, like, the CFO, and, like, wants to see,
sure,
like,
but they're the beneficiaries of the product, right? The sales reps are to some degree, but the burden that it places upon them, as we already talked about in the beginning of this conversation, is really, I don't know. I speak to salespeople all day, and few of them tell me how much they love it. They're all
nobody.
Like, this is just,
let's be frank.
Who is the part of their job? No, it's like almost like the idea of having to enter the data is like it's like a root canal for them.
So yeah, I think that they have realized this, and I think Salesforce is obviously making a lot of investments in, like, Agentforce, and is pushing this into customers, and customers are experimenting. I think, like, as a system of record, I see it as, like, being very difficult to be removed. But at the same time, we used to say this also for cloud. And, like, I worked at AWS, and, like, the story of AWS is, like, startups were the first users, and enterprises would say, forget it, we only do on-prem. That's the model. It's security, it's compliance, we'll never go on cloud. And yet now the majority of the revenues for AWS or other, like, platforms like this is, like, enterprises. So I think that it is possible to change. I think AI is extremely disruptive, and the entire, like, sales workflows would be very different. For now, we think that, like, our platform is like a middleware that sits on top of the CRM and creates all of the data cleaning and, analysis and validation and, automation that is required to have in your CRM the data that you need, not just in the CRM, but in other tools that are part of the stack, like, let's say SalesLoft or Outreach, all of these type of tools that are more like user focused. But it is possible that it's so disruptive that eventually people say, well, I mean, why do I use Salesforce?
That's what I think. I think that, I don't know, I hope, maybe it's a wishful thinking, but the burden, Salesforce, let's move away from the company. We'll go with the idea.
Yeah. We call it
CRM.
We call it the CRM industrial complex.
Yes, exactly. The CRM, I love it. So the CRM as the sort of central hub, right, of all the products and services that you and I talk about in companies right now. The burden of that tool has been placed on the salespeople. And that made sense, 10 years ago or 20 years ago to put it on them, because they're the ones who are in the interactions, and that's where the data came from, and that's where it can be put in. And I think it probably should have been taken away from them a long time ago, but there was just no way to do it. And I think now there is. I think it's going to happen somewhere else. It'll still be called a CRM, but I think there'll be, if I would say, like they have right now, right? We're not right now, but when I normally have my phone calls, as you've seen, because we've had our phone calls, we have my, Fathom tool or whatever it is running at the same time as me. And it's basically taking all the notes and it's doing all that stuff. And, an advanced version of it would be connected right to my CRM, or whatever you want to call it. And it would be just filling those things in real time. And when I hang up and I look at my dashboard, it has all the data that's in my Fathom is going into a repository that I can then take and I can analyze. So I don't ever have to touch it. I'm just sort of letting it happen. And then what I do is I just talk to it. I say, all right, here, look at all my calls this week. What are the things I need to do? What did I forget about? What are some things I need to know? What are some updates? Did any of the people I spoke to change jobs? Did they change their mind, or any information you have for me about them, or whatever the case may be? Or maybe even like, hey, I was thinking about the idea of maybe even considering proposing that Elio use an additional service that I forgot to mention to him. Based on the conversation, what do you think the liability would be there for me? Should I do that or not? And if I do, what would be the right way for me to propose that to him? I think that would be really cool. Yeah, I don't think so. His company seems too small. Based on things we've seen, X, Y, and Z, it's probably not the right time. But, if you're going to ask about it, you should ask these 3 questions. Like, that would be really incredibly good for me. My personality, to have someone coming and telling me that stuff, I'm very much more a, creative, type, communicator type. I'm not a planner type. So if somebody came to me and gave me the first, and I can tell you, a lot of the salespeople I work with are the same way. They just like to just get on the phone and start talking to people and listening and having conversations. And the prep work, they recognize its value, but they don't have the sort of brain to go and do it. It's hard, it's certain type. Researchers are researchers for a reason. That's what they do. Their brains are made that way. I need a researcher working for me, that gives me the research. And I think that would make a lot of salespeople right now. This is kind of why I'm getting a point here. A lot of sales that might fall into the B or C level in terms of their performance would become A players if they could just get back to doing the things that they're really good at. But right now they can't, because they're not being allowed to. So I do think like a lot of this stuff is pretty fascinating, and I look forward to the changes that are coming, and I'm benefiting from it now. Great deal. So anyway, we're getting to the end here. I want to make sure before we go, what's your ideal customer? Like, who are you looking for? What people work best for you? What don't? Like, what are the ones that are like not right for you?
We don't work really with early stage startups. We don't work with companies that have less than, say, like 10 or so reps. And so that, means that typically it's mid-market and up. If it's a startup, it's like Series C and above. And for now, we're very focusing on up to about 5,000, 6,000 employees, because the sales cycles there are like reasonable for a company like us. But we could serve like even, AWS. AWS could be a customer and benefit from what we do, but we're not going there because of sales cycle. But in terms of like the product is really great if you have like tons of data. We're talking about like, if you have a wide addressable market, so you can target hundreds of thousands of companies or, or people. And so it becomes much more important for those type of companies to prioritize their efforts.
Mm-hmm.
And so, at least 10, 15 reps. That means like, 300 employees or so, 200, 300 employees, the minimum, up to like, 5,000, 6,000 employees. And that's our like initial scoped ICP.
Mm-hmm.
And we're having like quite a bit of success in that target market because these companies don't really have a lot of alternatives. I mean, basically the alternatives that people ask me, especially investors, like, who do you replace? I mean, there is no technology that actually does this. There is technologies like, that are good for smaller companies like Clay, but they're not appropriate for larger companies. And
Okay.
so we typically replace manual processes, either or like hard-coded, duct-taped, we call it, stuff that, companies of that size that put together like internal enrichment hubs that are like, doing okay, but not like a fantastic job because they distract from the main, goal of that company, and they have to invest like product and tech resources in order to keep them alive. And instead, we have an entire company that is building this stuff, which is like a pretty comprehensive set of technologies, integrations, workflows, agents. So that's our target market right now. And we sell into RevOps, sales ops, marketing ops. So all the people that are tasked with like supporting the revenue teams, like CROs and CMOs, with like making sense of data scale.
Got it. Okay, great. So, well, look, I mean, this has been a great conversation, as I'm not surprised. And, I look forward to continuing to kind of promote together, trying to, bang the drum on this stuff. It's exciting times. And, I'm glad we ended up living in the same building. It's kind of funny.
It was
So,
totally by chance. I don't think that like, since, I would not have imagined to be doing this now, like starting from location services,
no
you
way.
probably either. So like, the building, which was a good building in a good area
It
in New
was,
York
yeah.
City.
Nice.
And I really enjoyed, by the way, like the event that we did together. I think like the energy of the room was very indicative that these are like very important topics on
Yeah.
people's mind. We did an event like here in
Yeah.
New
Yeah.
York.
So Elio is referring to the CRO roundtable events, which we've been doing
Yeah.
now. We did 4 of them, and Elio and I partnered on the last one. It was great. And, these are, you hear a lot about what's called like the anti-conference. It's exactly that. We don't have any presentations. There's no speakers. There's no demos. There's nothing like that. It's literally a room of people who are all CROs, and we just conduct a conversation where we all talk for 3.5 hours, and it goes by lightning fast, and everyone loves it. And that's what people really want, particularly CROs looking for other CROs to talk to. So these are great events. We're actually, I don't know, we're having another one with you in Silicon Valley on April 30th actually it's going to be in San Francisco. It's going to be at the Transamerica Tower. Which is really cool. And so we're trying to get some more people to show up to that one. And then I'm having another one in New York with another person on June 2nd, and maybe another. So we'll see. We got some more stuff to do, but they're good events, and everyone writes me about them. So I appreciate that last iteration. So it was good having you here, and thanks for this conversation.
Thank you, Warren.
And we will see you in the neighborhood.
Thank you. Ciao.
Thank you for listening to the CRO Spotlight podcast. The CRO Collective's mission is to help CROs succeed and help founders and CEOs build CRO-ready organizations. You can find out more information about our services at thecrocollective.com. That's thecrocollective.com. And we look forward to having you join us next time.